The Palestine conflict, Jesus of Nazareth, and this old lonely believer called Wilson Thambu. What have I to say on the Palestine issue? And what would Jesus have said about all this? For the last 1 year that the Palestine issue has been on fire, I've been thinking ever and anon about that Galilean who some 2000 years ago used to walk and move around in this region, not necessarily in Gaza, but in that region. That's why I'm using the word region. Preaching something entirely different from what you see now raging there. It's astonishing to think that 2 millennia ago, a man belonging to a people who were groaning under the yoke of foreign domination, the domination of the Roman Empire, could actually come out with this kind of a political, spiritual, humane vision, where he could proclaim love, not power, hospitality, not hostility, fellowship, not domination, compassion, not cruelty, as a hallmark of humanity. Think of Benjamin Netanyahu in contrast to Jesus Christ. Jesus says, put down the sword. He who takes the sword shall fall by it. I was particularly reminded of these words yesterday as the news came home, spread all over the world, and therefore came home via television, that the Hezbollah managed to send an unmanned calling card to Benjamin Netanyahu's residence in Caesarea. I was also reminded of that very interesting episode in which Jesus took his disciples to Caesarea to ask them two fundamental questions. What do people say I am? And who do you say I am? That's not my theme, therefore I will not reflect on these two questions, important as they are. It's incredible that in this region, which has been even before the birth of Jesus Christ, characterized largely by violence, bloodshed, unending hostilities, cruelty, and the unconscionable delight in spilling blood, taking life, destroying everything, that this region could actually witness the emergence of a spiritual genius like Jesus of Nazareth. The undying wonder of it haunts me, to tell you the truth. I can understand someone like Jesus being born in, say, India of those days. It's not as though India is spiritually romantic, but comparatively better. Well, I know what I'm making a controversial statement. Let the controversies be. Let's stay focused on this. Now, the interesting thing is that when Jesus said that the foxes have their holes, the birds in the air have their nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, he was making a statement of profound historical resonance, the true nature of which, I'm sorry to say, Christians don't understand. One of the aspects in which the proclamation of the gospel is so very poor and has been very poor for at least several centuries is that these interpretations, these exegeses, these proclamations, these sermons fail miserably to do justice to the profound and prophetic historical sense of Jesus. The more I meditate on this, the more astonished I become about the historical sense that Jesus had. Somehow Christians think that Jesus was an illiterate person or he lacked formal education and therefore he has no sense of history. And to the extent that he has no sense of history, his teachings are relevant only to the small little context in which he was. Though, to anyone who has even a nodding acquaintance with the teachings and the spiritual vision of Jesus Christ, the most astonishing thing, the astonishing aspect of his total outlook is its universality. Even though he was confined physically, geographically, materially to a very small patch in what was a seemingly unimportant stretch of the geopolitical map of the world, even then, Jesus was truly universal. And that's the most astonishing thing about him. Now, coming to this saying that the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, I sense some very profound historical echoes. And I'll only develop some thoughts about that which is particularly and directly relevant to the most tragic imbroglio that's raging in Palestine and the adjoining areas in this region at the present time. If you look at the conflict between the Jews and the Palestinians, fundamentally the issue is not religion. The issue is not God. The issue is not certain modes of worship. The issue is land. Land, land, land. Nothing else. Now, remember for a brief moment that almost every war fought in human history has had a reference to land. Going back to the early tribal wars, when humanity or human beings organized themselves in the most embryonic form of tribes, and a standard tribe being no more than 100 families in size, each tribe marked out for itself a certain extent of geographical area. On a kind of rough intuitive calculation as to how much land it needed to support life and life of the members of the tribe. Historians and anthropologists tell us that in those days, 1 acre of land could support 3 human beings. If 1 acre of land was cultivated, it would produce enough nourishment to sustain 3 human beings. So suppose you have a tribe of 100 people, so 100 families, and imagine each family to be 10 in number. In those days, family sizes were large. So you're talking about a population of some 1,000 people. Divide 1,000 by 3. You have about 333, or maybe make it 350, make it 400 acres of land. That is all that a tribe needed. But what happens? No tribe remains the same. Every tribe continues to increase demographically, increase in number. And as the membership increases, the need for land also increases. So if a tribe has 1,000 members now, or if a tribe had 1,000 members 10 years ago, and at the moment it has 1,500 members, there's a terrible shortfall as far as land is concerned. They don't have enough land to support the excess 500 people. So what does that tribe do? It attacks the next tribe. And if the tribe is weak, it is defeated, and the land possession of the tribe is appropriated by the victorious tribe. And in olden days, all the members of the tribe were exterminated. Later on, greater wisdom prevailed, and they decided to kill all the men and bring all the women and children. And later on, again, the wisdom changed, and they decided that they had also use for men. And the men were therefore turned into slaves, and they were made to work free of cost. So that's the tribal situation, the tribal wars. It is all about land. Even the Crusades were about land, holy land, holy land. And At the root of it is an old prehistoric archaic belief, which is interesting to know, that there is some kind of a relationship, some kind of organic, maybe even trans-organic relationship between God and a particular soil, particular land. There is an illustration of this in the Old Testament. The second book of Kings, when Naaman, the great military general from Syria, comes to visit the prophet in Israel to be healed. Of course, he is healed, and when he goes back, he has a request. The request is that he should be allowed to carry a certain quantity of the soil from the land of the prophet with him back into Syria. Because he believed, and that's the only way he could think, according to the kind of crude religious formation that he has had, there is a necessary relationship between this God, the God who lives only in the Jewish land, and the soil. Therefore, if he is to stay faithful to the Jewish God, he also needs the Jewish soil. And this idea, of course, works itself out in so many ways in different contexts. And most of us don't realize that the importance that we attach to the place where a particular religious or spiritual luminary was born belongs to this particular mindset or this kind of orientation, which is deeply embedded in human nature because of the old formation that we have had. One important thing all of us must remember is, as Blaise Pascal said, in the French pronunciation it is Pascal, but let's stick to the English pronunciation, Pascal. Blaise Pascal, the great French thinker. He says, all of humanity is just one person. As of now, there may be 8 billion people, but think of all of the 8 billion people as constituting one human person. This is what is called corporate personality. The whole of humanity comprising just one person. Let's say humankind as a person, Mr. Humankind. And Pascal says that all the experiences in the dim, distant past, they don't disappear. The experiences of humanity over various epochs, stages, ages of the human journey on the face of the earth, they don't disappear. They remain embedded in human nature. Human nature is a palimpsest. I hope you're familiar with the word palimpsest. That is a block or a surface on which succeeding generations write or leave their marks. Palimpsest. It's a beautiful word. Palimpsest. Human nature is a palimpsest. So we carry with us the experiences that our ancestors in a distant land, some 7,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago, underwent. And this early spiritual intuition has been scientifically validated by the profound developments in depth psychology in the 20th century, the second half of the 19th and the early half of the 20th century, particularly the work of a profound psychologist like Carl Jung, whose concept of the collective unconscious, and the American playwright Eugene O'Neill has written a very interesting play based on this insight, and that play is titled Emperor Jones. Emperor Jones. And the theme of that play is what happens to Emperor Jones as he falls out of favor, if he loses his seat of power and is driven out and is chased, and then he travels back in time. He goes all the way back to the early primitive orgiastic times. It's a very interesting theme. Again, I can only make a passing reference to this play by Eugene O'Neill. Title of the play is Emperor Jones, Jones. Very easily obtained from the net. Very interesting to read some of these works. So, going back to tribal wars, we have now seen that tribal wars are all about land. I remember when I was growing up, there used to be all kinds of property disputes between neighbors. It is all about land. Overnight, the boundary between two plots of land will shift a little bit, a little bit. And the other person, of course, is equally vigilant because he anticipates such naughtiness overnight, nocturnal naughtiness. And the next morning he'll come and inspect and satisfy himself that a bit of his land has been shaved off. So he'll make a hue and cry about it, and a huge quarrel, and it goes on. It used to be a kind of a predictable entertainment. Now, it is for this very reason that neighboring countries also cannot live in peace. One of the lessons that history teaches us is that two neighboring countries can never be at peace. What's the problem between India and Pakistan? It's not merely religion, the two-nation theory. It's also land. Kashmir continues to be a thorn in the flesh of both Pakistan and India. What's the tension between India and China? Land. What has been the tension between India and Bangladesh? Land. And you relax your vigilance on the frontier between India and Myanmar. Either India will encroach or Myanmar will encroach. Who is not fond of land? So Tolstoy has this wonderful story. How much land does a man need? The point of the story is that there is no limit to human greed for land. The two focal points of human conflict and bloodshed are land and woman. And that's because of the male domination. Homer's great epic, Iliad, is about the theft of a wife. So, in the teachings of Jesus Christ, there are definite teachings about transcending both. And in fact, there is more teaching about, and it's most important to know, there are more teachings about transcending attachment to material possessions, including land, than to transcending the lust for women. That is because the lust for land is more widespread and a far greater consequence in terms of human bloodshed and destruction than the lust for women. However, strangely enough, perhaps understandably enough, there is no culture, there is no civilization, there is no country, there is no epoch known to us which has not romanticized and spiritualized war, bloodshed. In one sense, that is a mark of the male domination in history. It's a it's a touchy subject, so it's not within the scope of my present repertoire of thinking to divert my attention into that avenue. So when Jesus said the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, I read that statement to also mean that extreme attachment to land, to where you lay down your head, is somehow harmful to human beings. Now, there is something of profound cultural importance in this statement which I need to mark or identify. You think of the image of somebody resting his head. Now, you can poetize it, you can romanticize it as a picture of repose, peace, rest, etc. Relaxation. But if you look at it in terms of the dynamism of history and the logic of life, the quintessence of life is in momentum, in vitality, in dynamism, in movement, not in resting. I'm not saying that we should not rest. Don't misunderstand me. What I'm saying is the essence of the impactfulness and the fruitfulness of life is momentum. Life is all about momentum. Like breath, for example. We must breathe continuously, otherwise we die. In a similar manner, if we lose the momentum of life and we become paralyzed, then we get alienated from the very wellspring of life. So when Jesus says the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, what he means is that the primary human requirement is not a place to lay your head. The primary requirement is experiencing and celebrating the momentum and dynamism, the vitality of life in all its fullness. Imagine attaining life of all in its fullness just lying down. You have a beautiful place to lay your head. Like the rich man that Jesus portrays in the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. He is shown as sitting. And we know in our times, for example, the various types of diseases that are induced by this kind of lifestyle problems. Sedentary lifestyle spews up its own health problems. In fact, I suffer from some of them because all my life I had to sit and read, sit and write for long spells. Sometimes hours on end. 10 hours, 12 hours. In one poster, I used to sit and read. As a result, my backbone has taken a severe beating. Let me not burden you with my personal problems. What I'm saying is that these are real issues. And when I developed these issues, I went to various very distinguished doctors, both within the country and at least in another country, UK. And all of them, in their own very nice and very convincing ways, expressed their inability to help me because these were the problems I invited upon myself, related to the kind of life I was leading. Therefore, I discovered for myself that the only treatment for my problems was exercise. And I've devised my own routine of exercises, which I do every day, at least for an hour and a half, if not more. And that's how I manage to keep alive. So I know I can speak from experience the problems that sedentary lifestyles can breed. So from all this, I know for a fact that the most fundamental thing about being alive is momentum. Unfortunately, people forget this. They all want to settle down to somewhere. And that process of settling down is driven largely by this state of ownership. Now, for example, I'm now declining into old age, if you like. I have a home in Trivandrum. By the way, all of you are invited to visit me and be my guest if you like, if you have the time and the inclination here in Perukada. I can accommodate up to 2 people at a time, maybe 4 people if you're willing to share a room. Now, because I have this place, I find it very difficult to move away from here. And the older I grow, the more attached I feel to this place. Because here I am used to everything. So that means I'm losing the momentum of my personality. It's an unhealthy thing. Jesus called his disciples not only to abide in him, but also to send them out. That process of sending them out is so vital. It is as vital as abiding in Jesus. In fact, the proof that you abide in Jesus is that you're willing to be sent out in his name, to live out the actual meaning of being in him. So, Jesus was particularly aware of the problem inherent in the serious, nightmarish, terrible problems inherent in human beings' attachment to the land. The spiritual insight is that ultimately land is not our refuge. Land is not even the ground of our existence, though land plays a very important role. Its relevance cannot be belittled, but land is not something that we have to relate to in a sense of maddening ownership or possessiveness. That is why the statement exists in the Bible, in the Psalms, that the earth is the Lord's and all the fullness thereof. So therefore, the appropriate or healthy spiritual idea is that this land is no man's freehold. The land belongs to God. God is the creator of all these resources, and these resources are meant not to constitute somebody's private property. These resources are meant to meet the needs of all human beings, and the needs of every human being is of the same value and priority in the plan of God as the needs of the greatest, noblest, and the most powerful of human beings. It is from this perspective that I find it utterly unbearable to think that Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war against the helpless inhabitants of Gaza for whatever stated or unstated war goals that Netanyahu may have. I consider this to be diabolic. There is no way I can justify this. And at the same time, as I've said in a former video, I consider the problem in this region to be insolvable so long as land is more important than human beings and the ownership of land is turned into a location of incurable hostility. Human beings come to exist for land and not land for human beings. And therefore it is deemed legitimate to sacrifice any number of human lives or cause unspeakable suffering and agony to living human beings, all for the sake of the land. Settlement, resettlement, the flushing out of the original people, dispute about who the original people are, Ikfa, Intifada, all the rest of it. There'll be no end to it. Now let me also draw your attention to one more thing and I'll close. I was amused that yesterday, when this Hezbollah drone managed to score a direct hit on Netanyahu's Caesarea residence, he was extremely indignant. He said the Hezbollah has committed a serious mistake. What's the mistake they have committed? The mistake they have committed is that they have targeted Benjamin Netanyahu's residence. Why have they targeted his residence? Because they want to kill him. Did they succeed in killing him? No, they did not. So they have committed a serious mistake. But is it a mistake to target Hassan Nasrallah, the chief of Hezbollah? Is it a mistake to target Sinwar or the other leaders of Hamas? No. That is a massive achievement. It's a tremendous blow for peace. And Joe Biden, for all his worldly wisdom and immense experience in strategic respects, has the naivete to say that now that Sinwar is eliminated, the way to peace is open. I was quite amused when I heard him say this. Sinwar is not the issue here. The issue here is land. And because of the land, the incompatibility between two people groups. Now, going back to the old biblical times, the only reason for the incompatibility between Ishmael and Isaac, to whom the Jews and the Arabs trace their pedigree, ancestry, the main reason for the incompatibility between the two, or what made it impossible for the two to coexist and grow up together, is land. Inheritance. Who will inherit the father's wealth? That was the issue. There was no other issue. There was no religion that separated the two brothers, stepbrothers then. It was only land. Then, as now, the issue is this, nothing else. Well, go back still further in history to prehistory, Cain and Abel. Why did Cain kill Abel, his brother? Same thing. Why was the fact that God was more pleased with his brother Abel such a an unbearable situation for Cain? Because God's favor was always related to material blessings. If God is pleased with you, you will become prosperous. If God is displeased with you, you are out on the street. So if you can kill your brother who is the object of God's special delight, then God has no option but to be pleased with you and give all the earthly inheritance to you. That's the idea, nothing else. It was keeping all of this in mind that Jesus says, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. That's precisely why he is the Son of Man. That's precisely why he can establish his kingdom in the hearts and lives of human beings. That's precisely why he has the spiritual authority to command, put down the sword. He who takes the sword shall perish by it. And therefore, if the historical sense of Jesus Christ is right, I have to tell you, my friends, I fear my masters dear. The Jews are in for a very bad time. God forbid. I don't want anybody to be in bad times. But this principle will hold good. He who takes the sword shall perish by it. This is no way to proceed. There is no hope at the end of this road. This is the road to the dead end. And I dare say that from October of 2013, for the foreseeable future, Jews nowhere in the world will live in peace. They'll have to live in extreme and unbearable insecurity. God help them. All because of the great wisdom of the present leadership. Well, I know that several of my viewers would argue with me very ferociously that the Jews had no alternative. But my dear friends, let me say this to you only this much. That life is like a game of chess. When you begin a game of chess, there are infinite possibilities. But as you make your moves, with each move forward, you're actually forfeiting large numbers of options. They just evaporate. Then you move further and further and further, and finally you reach the stalemate, when you think that there's no other option. So today when we are looking at the Palestine imbroglio from the position of the stalemate, it was not like this a long time ago. And what has guided this journey or this movement on the chessboard of history is covetousness in relation to land. The spiritual insight remains that the land belongs to God. The earth belongs to the Lord. And human beings must relate to this divinely appointed resource only with reference to meeting their needs, and not in terms of either material covetousness or in terms of military power or in terms of the imperial splendor and so on and so forth, or domination. All of these are diabolical projects. The Jews and the Palestinians will live together if and when, I don't know when, if and when they are led out of the present madness of assuming that this land belongs only to one of them. Both sides are equally keen to eliminate the other. That's the reason why I cannot take the side of any one group. If the Palestinians have the same or a little more power, military power than the Jews, they would have eliminated the Jews. Today, we are talking about the two-nation theory only because Israel is powerful. I'm not justifying power. I'm only marking a worldly reality. So both are identical, except that one party is more powerful than the other. Both are identical in their attitude to each other and in their attitude to land. Both want exclusive possession of this sliver of the land. And therefore both are bound, cannot help but see the other as an enemy, ideally to be eliminated, so that you can live in permanent peace. What's the formula of permanent peace? Eliminate the other and you are at peace. Wonderful, no? Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Jai Hind.